Welcome to In the Know with the Stafford SO, a podcast presented by the Stafford County Sheriff's Office in Virginia that brings you the stories of the men and women who work tirelessly to keep our community safe each day. With In the Know with the Stafford SO, you'll find out what life is really like behind the law enforcement badge. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Know with the Stafford SO. I am Kathy Volbert, your host. Thank you for tuning in. Today's guest is Captain Ben Worcester, who is in charge of the Special Operations Division of the Stafford Sheriff's Office. Captain Worcester has been with the Sheriff's Office for 18 years and has spent time in the Patrol Division and the Criminal Investigations Division. He has also served as the Division Commander of Administrative Services. He is now in charge of the Special Operations Division. Before he joined the Sheriff's Office, he served in the Marine Corps from 1998 to 2002. Captain Worcester, thank you for joining me today, and thank you for your service to both Stafford County and the nation.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, we have both been public servants in Virginia for a very long time, and one of the highlights of each summer is when laws that were passed and signed by the governor during the legislative session earlier in the year of the Virginia General Assembly go into effect. And this year, there were several hundred that became law on July 1st, but we are going to focus on just a few of them today. So the first law that we'll be talking about has to do with the decriminalization of simple marijuana possession. And I know that you'll talk in more detail about all of these. Then secondly, we'll talk about the red flag law, which has to do with what law enforcement can do with firearms of certain individuals. And then we'll also talk about new laws impacting traffic safety. But let's go back to the beginning and talk about the change in law regarding simple marijuana possession. Now, before, someone with just, I think, a half ounce of marijuana or less would be guilty of a Class 1 misdemeanor. Now, with the newly signed bill, there are some changes that came about. Can you talk about, first of all, what do citizens need to know about this new law?
Sure. So, first off, just as a disclaimer, so the viewers know that I'm not an attorney, but I'll provide in this information the best of my ability as I understand it. And if anyone has personal situations, they should seek legal counsel for guidance on how to handle those. But in reference to this changes in legislation having to do with marijuana, really the biggest or significant change is that it will be a civil offense for adults for less than 1 ounce of marijuana. So in that civil offense, the maximum penalty will be $25, whether it's the first offense or the 500th. The most that can happen is a $25 civil penalty.
Okay.
It is still, however, a delinquent act for juveniles.
Okay. So what can they expect from law enforcement? Say they've been pulled over and this becomes an issue. What should citizens expect?
So the fact that it's a civil offense doesn't change a whole lot in terms of the way that law enforcement will approach marijuana because it is still illegal. It is still considered contraband. And while some states have moved towards legalization, and that may be where we're headed, right now it is still contraband and it is still unlawful to possess. It just happens to be a civil penalty if it's less than 1 ounce. However, more than 1 ounce can be charged as distribution, and that jumps to a felony. That still remains a felony. And so while the odor of marijuana indicates the presence of marijuana, it doesn't indicate how much. And so it could be a civil penalty or it could be a felony. And so that's why law enforcement still has the authority to search and do things that is considered government intrusion upon people in terms of illegal activity.
I was just going to ask, how does this change affect what our law enforcement officers can do, and I think you just mentioned it, they can still search if they suspect that the individual might have marijuana on his or her person?
Correct.
Okay.
And there's in every one of those situations, it is going to be totally dependent on the facts and circumstances as to the level of that government intrusion. Certainly, a $25 fine is a lot less of a penalty than what it used to be, and so you're going to find police agencies across the Commonwealth adjusting how they deal with marijuana. And it's going
And
to
I
be
think,
governed by the policies of those offices.
right, I think the term decriminalization might be misleading to some people. And so they just need to be aware that, I mean, that could still pose some trouble for them. So they need to be careful. And like you said earlier, educate themselves on what the laws are.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Let's move on to the red flag law, which involves firearms and what law enforcement can do with an individual's personal firearm. Can you talk again? Let's go back to, first of all, what do citizens need to know about this particular law?
So, red flag was designed to have a mechanism for which the law enforcement or the government can predict a crime that is about to occur from a citizen who is likely to hurt themselves or others by the possession of firearms in the near future.
Okay.
And so when those conditions occur, what can happen is facts or circumstances are presented to law enforcement, who can now petition a judge or magistrate for something called an ESRO, or Emergency Substantial Risk Order. This Emergency Substantial Risk Order is good for up to 14 days, where the facts are heard and they issue a document wherein it allows law enforcement to go to the residence of that citizen to request the removal of those firearms to protect lives. And then before the expiration of that 14 days, or at the expiration date, they can have another hearing where the judge can find the facts sufficient by clear and convincing evidence, is the way they phrase it, to issue a substantial risk order, which is good for up to 6 months.
Okay. Now, does that individual have to be the one to take the action after that 14 days to go back to, I guess, to request that his or her firearms be returned?
So an individual can request the removal of these orders through the court.
Okay.
And then the court can decide that the facts do exist, that they're a danger, or that they do not, and that the firearms can be returned.
Okay. All right. And does anything with this particular new law change how our law enforcement officers conduct themselves regarding firearms?
Well, this law is brand new, so this changes everything in terms of a procedure for predicting a crime.
Okay.
I believe every other statute, and there may be an exemption, I'm not sure, but I believe every other statute is a statute that's enforced because a crime happened, not because we believe there's about to be a crime. And so this is new territory for law enforcement officers in Virginia.
Okay.
It has happened in other states, but it is brand new for us. And so the fact that the government would be involved in this is new to us. It's a learning process, and the intent again is to save people by looking at the red flags, the indicators. Why is this person a danger, and why should we take their guns away? And we know that the Second Amendment is cherished by many, and we don't want to do this unless it is completely justified, and we know through these facts and circumstances that it's going to help save someone, because otherwise, that we wouldn't want to be involved in taking guns away for our lesser facts and
Sure.
surrounding the situation.
Okay. Were there other areas of the red flag law that you wanted to mention?
Background checks are now required in the Commonwealth for the sale of all firearms. It used to be dealers were held to that standard, but now it applies to private citizens for sales.
Okay.
Not every transfer or loan or by a private, not every loan or giving it to a family member without selling it requires a background check. But it does apply to every sale, whether it be at the gun show or private citizen to citizen sale.
Let's move on and talk about some of the new laws that impact traffic safety. What do citizens need to know?
So one law that is new is smoking in a vehicle with a minor is now a minor under the age of 15 is a civil penalty up to $100.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're just trying to, safeguard those young children from inhaling the secondhand smoke.
Yes.
So that's new. There's another one, hands-free driving. This is certainly a huge deal for citizens. We are all connected with our smartphones and information we all want readily available. So the only way it will be lawful to drive and be in communication is if it is not handheld. So any personal communication device cannot be in your hand or it's a violation. And this has a delayed start date because they want to do a campaign so that citizens are educated on this change in law before it starts getting enforced, which makes perfect sense.
Right.
So this will start January 1st,
okay,
2021.
Okay. And that's so important too for our new teen drivers to know because they live with their phones attached to them, it seems like. So for them to get educated upon this and just be ready for when they are actually out there on the road is so important.
Certainly.
Are there any other areas of traffic safety that you wanted to discuss?
Yes, ma'am. Reckless by speed. We know that on Interstate 95, prior to this new law, reckless by speed was anything over 80 miles per hour. And they're changing that to anything in excess of 85 miles per hour is reckless by speed.
Okay. Now, the last question I wanted to ask, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I know that the Virginia General Assembly passed a multitude of new laws, and our sheriff's office is having to make sure that they're educated on all of them. How is the sheriff's office training deputies to make sure they know what the changes are, what the new laws are, and before they hit the road?
We set up a full day of training so that deputies can learn these changes. We're just picking some here today to discuss in a short period of time. However, the deputies spent a full training day, an 8-hour block, where they heard from someone from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They learned from command staff and supervisors that had in-depth conversations with someone from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and engaged in discussion and question and answer sessions to make sure that they understand what these changes are, how it affects us, and how we handle these changes out on the street when dealing with citizens.
If they would also like additional information on the laws, the best thing that they can do is visit the Virginia General Assembly's website at virginiageneralassembly.gov. You can find out what bills were introduced, what passed, what failed, and what is pending until the next session. So, Captain, is there anything else that you'd like to mention to our listeners before we conclude our podcast?
So there's a couple of things. One is a brand new list that will be hosted by the state police where citizens can voluntarily put their name on a do not sell firearms list where they could say volunteer. Again, this is voluntary. Provide your name to the state police and they keep it in a database. And then that person is now ineligible to be sold firearms, and it's illegal for a firearms dealer to sell because they will have access to that database to cross-reference. So that's a bit of a shift in the law, as well as grand larceny is now a misdemeanor all the way up to $1,000. So it's a felony grand larceny threshold at $1,000, where it used to be $500, and a couple years before that it was $200. So that's a big shift there.
Okay.
And then two more quick things. This custodial interrogation of a child requires parental notification now. It was always a good practice before, but now it's into law. If a child is going to be questioned while in custody, and that's important, about the crime for which they're in custody for, a parent must be notified.
Okay.
And then the last thing is the police are now required to obtain certain data when they're conducting traffic stops. And so much of this data will be recorded just based on observations of the officer. There may be some questions relative to information that the officer is trying to collect that must be submitted to the state police. And so citizens should know across the Commonwealth that not just here in Stafford, but across the entire Commonwealth, police officers may be asking additional questions in reference to demographic information so that they can comply with the state standards for submitting the data to the state police.
Okay. Well, and again, we've just scratched the surface of all the new laws that went into effect on July 1st. For additional information, individuals can visit the Virginia General Assembly website at virginiageneralassembly.gov. Captain, thank you so much for joining me today. That wraps up this episode of In the Know with the Stafford SO. Thank you for tuning in. Have a wonderful and safe day.
Thank you for listening to In the Know with the Stafford SO. This podcast is produced by members of the Sheriff's Office and is one more way we connect with our community. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Visit our website at staffordsheriff.com for details about our social media channels as well as events where you can meet our staff. Thank you for your support.